Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back and gone! So, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. The classic, not the pishy remake.
No.
With Ricardo Montalban.
The legend.
The Enterprise boss. I love this movie. It is... Oh. So, I watched Space Seed prior to it, so I could watch both of them, and I repeated watching it. And I find it funny, the Space Seed. Not so much how dated it is just how quickly everything happened. Like the McInnes, McIver,
Lieutenant McIver. Was it Lieutenant McGivers? Was it?
MacGyver's? I basically kept mispronouncing it. But it was the fact is, she came in, saw him, went gooey-eyed, and he says, "Kiss me." No. Out. Okay, I'll stay in. And it was just literally click, 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 and I'm going to actually take over the ship. You with me? No. Yes. Okay.
I have a feeling
it was just very, very quick, and it was good to watch. It was fun to watch, but when you're watching something later on where they sort of do it a bit more subtly, it just seemed quick.
I think. Yeah. See, I've got a theory about that whole thing. With her falling for him so quickly, and that's down to he's almost got a Svengali type character, and it's part of his genetically engineered personality, and he's the type of personality that quickly sort of brings people around him.
Yeah, well,
I think that's where they were trying to go with that.
Yeah,
I thought it was just his bare chest.
Bones says he had a charisma. But then again, in all fairness, it's Ricardo Montalban.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I'd have been with him.
Hello, yes, no problem, boss. I'm with you.
Not really, but yeah, he was Ricardo Montalban. I mean, that's it. End of story. Exactly. You know, he's a kind of an actor that no matter when he appeared throughout his career, he would just literally captivate the minute he came on screen, and he was just so well cast in this for this type of a character.
I think he was perfectly cast. I know nowadays you get people who are actually saying, he played a Singh, so it's a Sikh. It wasn't a case of he's Spanish, isn't he, Ricardo Montalban?
Mexican. I think
Mexican. But the thing is, it wasn't a big change over. But I think he's just got the charisma. He just dragged me in.
The thing about that, anybody wants to complain that, I just turn around and explain how it works for them. Singh and Khan are both indicators of a religion, not a race. Singh is Sikh. Khan, I believe, is a Muslim indicator. It's a religion, not a race. So it doesn't matter who plays him. The fact that you can complain that he's not Sikh, but you can't complain that he's not Indian.
Right.
Yeah. But I just think he's got that charisma. He can just drag you straight in, and he did in Space Seed. He just basically dragged you straight in.
Right. My favorite scene in Space Seed. Shall I tell you it? It's the one where Kirk and McCoy and Spock are discussing the eugenics wars, how actually Khan rose to power and the kind of dictatorship it was. And Kirk's going, there were good things about the dictatorship. There were certain progressive things about the dictatorship. Oh,
yeah.
Hey, some noise in the background. Someone turn it down.
That's that, Alex.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, okay. So you're saying like there's some kind of progressive things about the dictatorship. He said he was quite a merciful dictator in some ways. He didn't do many massacres. And Spock's like, but there was this little freedom, Captain. And Spock's like, how can you admire these people? And it's like, how have you kind of been seduced by this character? And Kirk's like, Spock, it's a human thing. We can.
We're all barbaric. We're all barbaric.
No. What he says is we can despise them and admire them at the same time.
But he says we've got that bit of barbarism in us. We can admire them and despise them at the same time.
Yeah, but it's also, I think, we can we can admire people who just take command, who are very commanding and are sure of their ability to move humanity forward in their direction.
Yeah. And what I liked about Space Seed as well is we first come in and says, "What's your name?" He says, "First, I need to know this, 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 and this." And you're sitting there thinking, really? But he just commands. He just basically takes command. Isn't it a case of you think you when you're watching it from the outside, you're going, really? Would he actually be able to command this guy to actually give him that information without? But he's just got that personality. You can see why Kirk would just tell him stuff.
When McCoy first revives Khan, when he's out on the sickbed and Khan's like playing asleep, and then he leaps at him with a knife and says, "Where am I?" It's like that bit actually made me jump.
You're in a bed.
That's down to Montalban.
It is. Yeah.
I think it makes a degree of sense that he would have that command presence because he's genetically engineered, modified for it. B, he has the experience and the life experience to have that command presence. C, he's on a spaceship which is effectively a military vessel. They're used to chain of command. They train their officers to have that presence. So Kirk is going to people are going to recognize that, and they're going to respond to it because they've been trained to respond to it.
And the innate issue with Khan as well is that he's arrogant. That's the error that they made, where he's genetically superior in all ways, but he also has an emotional side, which inevitably becomes his downfall. He's arrogant.
Well, isn't that and the human side of him, of course, is he's a connoisseur of literature. He's a connoisseur of the classics of. So he kind of fancies himself as a bit of a Captain Ahab, a bit of a various different intellectual heroes. He thinks he's the hero of his story, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he does.
But Colin, I want to kind of call out when you said the thing about the military thing. But the thing about the military thing is, on the military, you're trained to obey the people on the, your superiors. To see someone like Khan as the enemy. Your loyalty is to the ship rather than the. So it's supposed to instill in you a sense of you're not going to turncoat to the enemy. I take your point. You're right, but the thing is you've got two things. But the other thing you've got playing is he's got command presence. You've got that's what a military will train its officers for. So you've got two things that indeed you're absolutely right. They're trained, shit and the rest of it, but they don't necessarily know he's an enemy at that point. And so there is a degree of that response that, and I think the same as you tend to see sort of these things in you've seen them things in World War II or movies that are based on true events where you get the Germans will respect the English officers when they and vice versa. When they capture them as prisoners of war, they still have a degree of that respect amongst them. So I think I take what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. But I still think there's that degree of command presence that he's got. He's genetically engineered, and they are conditioned to respond to that. Perhaps even before they think, okay, hold on a second, no, I shouldn't be doing this. This guy's not in my chain of command. But I definitely take your point. Yes, you're definitely right there. I've had another thought, actually, is that the Enterprise crew is curious about these men because Khan and his men and women, just be politically correct, because they are from a different time. And, with the Enterprise, it's like it's military, but it's also scientific exploration.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more fascinating than a relic of the past that survived that will tell them a lot about the culture of the past. And so that's why there is this desire to get to know Khan and get to know yesterday's men.
And that's right. That innate curiosity. That spirit of exploration and finding out, rediscovering things. And unfortunately, he uses it against them in that regard.
And I think when they did the movie,
hi John,
I thought they did it perfectly because they went back to the original series. A character who is, apart from Chekov, who has met all the other ones and has relationships with them, so he knows them all. He's had the bits with Kirk and Spock and such like. And when they actually did that movie and they brought Ricardo Montalban back to play Khan again, it was just a perfect way. Can you imagine any movie franchise or any TV show 20 years down the line when they're actually doing a movie and they say, okay, we want to actually follow up from that story? How many would actually bring the original characters back?
Well, that was another, stroke of genius, really.
Yes, it definitely was.
For sure.
I think it wasn't just genius; it was luck, because Nicholas May was brought in to do the film. He wasn't really a fan of Star Trek, and he was just brought in because, we tried the big expensive Robert Wise, and we tried the big budget, and it didn't really work. I mean, it was a big hit, but they thought we need to scale it down, and Nicholas May was new to it, and he was like, well, I'm not much of a fan. And he was shown a selection of, I believe he was shown 3 particular episodes. I know one of them was Space Seed. I think he might have been shown, I think the other one might have actually been Mud's Women. And he might have been shown the third one. But it was
they would have done a great movie if Mud was back in. I know they brought Mud into the new stuff. I think that a movie with Mud would have been funny, a fun movie. Just for the simple fact is, I can't even remember who played Mud.
Yeah.
He was just such a great character as well. You just imagine a movie with him in it.
Pimping ain't easy, but someone got to do it.
Yeah. Mind you, it would have been difficult to do a movie with Mud after the...
The what? PJ, you're frozen.
Quentin Mad? Oh no, number 47.
Harcourt Fenton Mutt?
Yes.
Roger C. Carmel was the chap who played Harry Mudd. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's got such a great personality as well. Because in the character of Harry Mudd, he just nailed the character. And I think that's what they did with a lot of the ones like Ricardo Montalban. He nailed Khan. Harry Mudd was nailed. It's the same as they did in the Next Generation. Q was nailed.
John Delancey
just nailed Q. There's certain ones like that. So even with the Forever Battlefield in the original thing, the two that played in that, the one who played the Riddler in Batman,
Frank Gorshin,
one of them.
Yeah.
And he was really good as the seemingly sane one, but it was just as crazy as the crazy one, because one was half black and the other one was half white, and people would have gone, can't see the difference. And that's what it was, and the two of them nailed those characters. You could understand it, and it was just a case of they got the right people to play the right characters, and I think they did that right across the board. And then remaking it and bringing Ricardo Montalban back was just nailed it.
Well,
although I would have liked to have seen the woman come back as well. Obviously, she either says no, so they had to kill her off, or something along those lines.
Well, I think it gave Khan a reason as well. One of his many reasons to be furious and angered and filled with hate and revenge, because the fact that nobody came back to check on them meant that his wife died, for nothing, because obviously after SETI Alpha 6
months after they were put down.
So he's lost his wife, so that's folded in as part of his his arc.
See, the part they were talking about, right? It confused me, and I think whoever had written that part of the show sort of didn't quite understand, because Khan was saying, you didn't know this was SETI Alpha 5 because SETI Alpha 6 exploded and knocked us out of our orbit, right? So he's knocked it out of our orbit, but he's implying that he put him into orbit where number 7 was, because if 6 has exploded and they were 5, and he says, you think I'm SETI Alpha 6, and I'm sitting there thinking that means the one SETI 6 exploded, 7 must have moved and
Oh.
5 must have moved out there.
Wait.
It was almost weird.
Wait, what if City Alpha 5 had a moon, and when they were knocked out of orbit, the moon remained, and they thought that was City Alpha 5?
But it's just that the way they did it, it just seemed a wee bit clumsy because of the way they tried to explain that. You think it was City Alpha 5, but City Alpha 6 exploded, and then, wait a minute, if you were 5, surely you would have got blown nearer the sun rather than further away.
Wouldn't there be a debris ring as well?
No, wait. Sometimes planets have an elliptic orbit, which means they
I know it would
overlap.
have been out, but it's just a case of it just seemed weird the way they talked about it.
Well, the thing is, you got to think about this. Is Khan making sense of where he is? He's got no superior means of stargazing, but he's intelligent enough to make sense of what happened to the planet from just from the limited. Yeah, exactly. And he knows what a planetary shift means. And
yeah, well, they must have felt the effects.
Yes, they must have, obviously, because so many people died, and there must have been the taking them out of orbit.
It was implied
1999.
It was implied as a nuclear winter hit the planet, wasn't it? It's like the entire weather system went chaotic, and that's why, of course, when they beam down there, it's a really sour place.
But it was just they tried to explain how they didn't know it was Ceti Alpha 5, considering. Yeah, I mean, it was just weird.
Well, no, wait.
That Kirk hadn't actually mentioned anything in any records. So when they were in the Ceti Alpha system, there must have been a record saying that in Ceti Alpha 5, these people were here.
PJ, when you go into a planetary system, you tend to count from the outside in, probably. So that's probably why they thought, well, that must be Ceti Alpha 20, that's 19, we've passed 18, 17, 16, 15. Yeah. So
they thought... Not really, because we're Sol 3. So it's usually Sol 1, 2, 3, So they usually start from in and out.
No. If we're leaving the solar system, yes, but they're entering the solar system, which means they're entering from the end of the solar system.
Yeah, when they're usually cataloguing the solar system, they catalogue it from the star.
Yeah, but they'd be counting down rather than up, I think, is what you're saying, Tanaka.
Yeah, I think. But the thing is, when they're going to Ceti Alpha, they must have had records saying that these planets will have life on them.
Well, not Ceti Alpha 6. Ceti Alpha 6 was meant to be barren.
Yes, but they should have known that there was life. So the fact that captain didn't know anything about Khan, considering when he was going to Ceti Alpha, they would have had to do a survey, so they would have taken records for each of the planets in that system.
No,
that's what I'm saying. And the captain didn't know anything about Ceti Alpha 5 or anything like that.
But PJ, in the Star Trek universe, most solar systems have an inhabited planet. That's not unusual. And it's like their mission was to find an uninhabited planet they could use as a test grounds.
But the fact is, the captain actually states he didn't know anything about Khan. But if they're going into that system and looking for an uninhabited planet, they must have had records of the inhabited planets.
Yeah.
So there must have been a record that Kirk put in his record for what happened with Khan. So it would have been there for that star system. That's what I'm saying.
Well, didn't Kirk say, make the judgment off the record? He said, well, I'm dropping the charges.
Dropping the charges, but he would have still had to put a record of his flight. It's his captain's log, stardate, He does that even if he's actually just going out and dropping stuff off to a starbase. He still has to have a flight log. So you would have had to put a report. As a military, you must know that you have to actually do your reports of what happened on your mission, as it were. So they would have had to have something down. And what I'm saying is, it would be on file somewhere that in this system there's this, and this. It was the fact that captain didn't know. It was just a case of, how did he not know? He must have had records as a captain to see, well, don't need to look at these planets because they've got life on them. That's what I'm saying. It just seemed a wee bit clumsy.
Yeah, but do Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of records. I mean, do you expect the captain to read every single one? I mean, they can get a
I
bit...
would expect him to read things in this about this star system he's charting to look for an uninhabited planet. That's what you think about it. If you're going somewhere and you've got let's say 20 planets in a system, and you have to look for you have to catalogue them all. The first thing you're going to do is say, well, we don't need to do that one because there's life there, there's life there, there's life there. And that's what I'm saying. There would be reports. So why wouldn't the captain read the reports?
Wait a minute. Wait, usually external planets of a solar system are gas planets, which means they're not suitable. That's why they can't use. Yeah.
Yes, but there would be a catalogue of, because they're looking for uninhabited planets without any life.
Yeah.
So they would have the catalogue of the planets that aren't suitable because they know they're gas giants, ones that aren't suitable because they've got life. And he must have had to read the report because he's cataloguing the system for the Genesis.
If one might get slightly meta here, we are risking. We are
about the guys who wrote it just didn't want to actually think about it.
Well,
we are aware of that.
No, we're also looking at the fact. I mean, something that you always have to remember when you're looking at the original series, especially, we're looking at a show, the original of which was finished before the moon landings, right? With 50 plus years, 60 almost years of scientific knowledge and advance in space sciences. So it's quite possible that a lot of these things we now think are quite obvious wouldn't necessarily have been thought of. I mean, they may not have known how many. I mean, they probably didn't know even when Wrath of Khan was being made. They probably didn't have any real approximation about how many planets there are out there. And how many would have been.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, I'm willing to forgive a lot.
Because I quite agree. I'm willing to forgive it all. I'm just saying
because the quality of the film is just so incredible.
Yeah. Also, it's the same as a lot of the reviews I do. When I'm watching a movie, I sit back and enjoy it. But when I'm looking at it for a review purposes, these things pop up and you think, It's only because it doesn't ruin the movie at all. It's still one of my top. If I'm going for a Star Trek movie, Wrath of Khan's always the top one for me. The other ones, some of the other ones are okay, not a problem. But Wrath of Khan, if I had to choose any one of the movies, Wrath of Khan will always be at the top of that list.
I'd say Voyage Home, but for me, the three, Voyage Home, Wrath of Khan, Search of Spock, they make this complete package.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say definitely those three, yes, but I would still put Wrath of Khan right at the top. So if I only had to take one Star Trek movie, Wrath of Khan would be the one that would be in my. I wouldn't even need to think about it. Wrath of Khan would be the one because to me it is the most entertaining of the lot.
But the Voyage Home is wonderful. It's a brilliant, brilliant
the bit with the Spock with his ears and they get.
It's so great. It's hard, and it's it's what we needed at that stage because we suffered this horrifically emotional pain, of losing Spock, a character, and it was just it is a physical pain. I mean, these characters are family. And so those films I'm always grateful for because they've, they kept it a little bit lighter and I think it was something that we needed because it was so dark at the end of Khan, but yet it was handled so well and so poignantly that I'm just glad that we had the movies after it though to give us that uplift again.
I mean, Leonard Nimoy said that. He said he felt like, in a way, he made the Voyager her home as a reaction to Wrath of Khan. He said, okay, we want to do something different. Wrath of Khan got a bit dark. Search of Spock got a bit dark. I want to do a Star Trek film that's light and that doesn't have a villain and gets back to the old series. I think they felt they needed a big villain to really launch the second film. And then Nimoy was like, but the best Star Trek episodes didn't have a villain. The villain was misunderstanding. It was other issues. There was.
I think the biggest villain was the whaling ship.
That my favorite scene from that is when they materialize, they decloak the Klingon battle cruiser right over that.
The whaling ship just goes doing, and then it decloaks.
What the hell is that?
I love that scene.
I do.
Do you know what that scene? I know it sounds silly, but I would have preferred. It reminds me of Crocodile Dundee, the bit with the kangaroo with a gun.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's it. It reminded me of that because they're firing the harpoon, it goes doing, and it's almost a case of what the. And then they uncloak, but it's it just always reminds me of the Crocodile Dundee one, which I just watched a couple of days ago. Is the bit where the guy goes, "Shh, over there!" The thing, mate, and there's the kangaroo with a gun comes out and starts shooting up, and they're going and running, and it just reminded me of that. I don't know why. I think it was just because you've got the whaler bouncing, and then the other one where the guys are shooting up the kangaroos, and there's suddenly one shooting back. Just remind me of each other.
The way I saw it with Star Trek 4 is let's save on the budget, let's chuck them in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yes,
no, but I think like Wrath of Khan, both films are a good case of like they did more with less. Because with Star Trek 2, they said, look, you overspent on the last film, we're going to scale your budget down, and they brought Nicholas Bayer in, and he said, well, that's my budget. I can make 5 films with that, because he was quite shrewd about how to make the budget stretch and how to do more with less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what he did.
The best thing is you should have actually did the other 4 films and put them aside for now.
Yeah.
Put them out.
There weren't even that many sets in Wrath of Khan, were there?
No.
They reused the Enterprise set as the Reliance set, so they got more out of that one set. Yeah.
And I mean,
The one. Sorry, Colin.
So most of the main sets would have been the 2 starships.
Yep.
Space station.
Space station.
Set Alpha 5.
SETI Alpha was probably on a soundstage, wasn't it? I mean,
the SETI Alpha 5 would have just been the bit where the Genesis arc, the rectangle they had for in the planet, where they say, is this for the Genesis chamber? I think that's all they've done is just redress that as the SETI Alpha 5.
I'm sure. I not very long ago, I listened to Leonard, a couple of years maybe now. I was listening to one of Leonard Nimoy's autobiographies, reading it, and I'm sure they're saying that the fact that they were going to kill Spock off at the end of it leaked out. Mm-hmm. So they deliberately filmed him being killed in the simulation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So everybody thought, "Oh, thank God for that, he's not dead." So at the end of it,
and that line,
that was clever.
Kirk came out with, "Aren't you supposed to be dead?"
Yeah. That's probably, I must admit that. So does anybody else think does anybody really want to see somebody make a little meme where basically they do this bit where they're going through the nebula, and every time they see the Enterprise, the navigator goes, the Enterprise, and Hervé Villechaise's voice.
See, that's what I said. Basically, they should have had one of the crew when especially going through the thing, mate, instead of saying, they should have actually says, even if it was a case of not saying boss, the Enterprise, but something along those lines. Just even one of the very first time they see it, saying,
I've got a feeling
the Enterprise, something like that. But
I'm sure Fantasy Liner that was made after.
No, there's a picture.
Alex
showed the picture that of Khan standing, and somebody had got an inflatable thing and put Tattoo's face on it.
Yeah.
So it was that film before the Wrath of Khan. So he'd obviously, So the Fantasy Island, because there was a picture of Khan standing in his outfit, and some of the crew had got an inflatable wee robot thing and stuck Tattoo's face on it, and there's a picture on the set. So,
okay.
It was Alec. You showed me that yesterday, didn't you?
I am looking for it right now, and I've got it.
Right. Can I tell you something? In the in the novelization, it goes a bit further into the simulation scene, and Saavik is actually being rated on her performance. And Kirk's asking her, what would you do if you could do the whole simulation again? If you got that distress call, would you answer it or would you decline? And she said, I would answer it, even if it meant destroying me and destroying the ship. And he's like, and what he says is like, a lot of resources are invested in your training. Don't you think you owe it to the Federation to preserve yourself so you can carry out your responsibilities? And she says back, you ask me if I should not preserve myself so I can carry out my responsibilities. I ask you, what are my responsibilities? By the criteria you have named, my responsibilities are to preserve myself so I can carry out my responsibilities. This is a circular and self-justifying argument. It is immoral in the extreme. A just society, like the Federation, employs the military for one reason alone, to protect its civilians. If we decide to judge that some civilians are worth protecting and some are not, if we decide we're too important to be risked, then we destroy our own purpose. Yeah. We cease to be the servants of our society and we become its tyrants. And Kirk is like blown away. She's like, wow, she is ferocious. She is not, she is, she's a true believer.
Right.
I was not 77 apparently the 77 to 84 was Fantasy Island, so it had been made by then.
I think because that's the picture there.
Yeah. By the way, Ricardo Montalban, I think he'd been playing such a nice guy on Fantasy Island so long that they had to give him the tapes of Space Seed so he could watch it again and get back into the character of Khan. And he said after a few watches, he was Khan again.
Well, that would make sense. Yeah, you would definitely want to go back and sort of
see with some people
recapture.
It doesn't work. Because I've been watching The Librarian, right? Bruce Campbell's in it; it's great, and they obviously whoever did the part with Bruce Campbell in it. There's an episode later on about there's a load of zombies, and the guy calls them Deadites. That's just something that popped up today, but it's the same again. The Bruce Campbell one, he plays Santa in it, which is a great episode. But there's other episodes in that, and even in what was the one? Numbers. There's character actors who play good guys in other things later on, but see watching them playing a bad guy, it just seems dead weird. But with Ricardo Montalban, no matter what he does, it just seems right. It just seems to fit straight into it. Whereas other ones, because you've seen them playing the good guy, it seems weird seeing them play the bad guy. Whereas Ricardo Montalban, he is exactly what he is. Good guy, just fits it.
But the thing is, in Wrath of Khan, he's a nastier Khan than he was in the TV episode.
Yeah.
Yes, he definitely is, because he tortures the crew. Whereas the nearest he got to torture was basically just try to get them to join him by suffocating Kirk, then threatening each one at a time. Whereas in this one, he tortures the scientists, and because they don't get what they want, he slits their throats.
In the novelization, it describes the scene when he does it. It's like it's not off screen in the book; it's actually described.
The good thing is, I don't think you needed to see it because just the body's there.
Well, I think the theme that they're going for as well with Khan is you notice that they have that wonderful tie-in with Moby Dick throughout Star Trek. And obviously, Ahab becomes blinded by his rage and his need for vengeance on this whale. And that's what's happened with Khan's, where he's, like in Space Seed, he's more civilized, whereas he's been forced to do things that have changed him, and he's seen things that have changed him, and he's become embittered, and the rage is taken over. So I think that's where they're going with that as well. They're, it's an allegory for.
Because you look at his final monologue, to the last, I will grapple with thee.
It pulled some of it right from
stab at thee for hate's sake. I spit my last breath at you. So he's even admitting with his last words that it's just down to pure hate.
Well, the thing is, like, for the moment he escapes the planet, he can't turn back. It's like, I can't, he can't let this go. He suffered too much, and and it's like once he knows that there's Genesis, like once he sees like I can take over the Federation, I can use this as a serious weapon, then he knows, well, I don't have to hide away. I can actually start to take over. But first I need to take down Kirk because he's the one. It's a kind of a narcissism thing where it's like I need to get one over on him
because I need to prove I'm better than him.
Yeah, and it's also, he's going straight for Kirk rather than say the president of the Federation. Like, I mean, if Khan was intent on conquest, he would have gone straight for Earth. But he didn't. He was like, well, I need to get the Enterprise first.
Yeah.
And because he beat me, so I need to beat him to show I'm better.
Yeah. And when his back was against the wall, knowing he could not win, one of his, mentor said, but you have Genesis, and he just really raged into him and goes, no, I want Kirk. I want him gone first.
Mm-hmm. It's like he can't let it go. He had it. I think the other thing is he had that chance when he left him in the cave, and he says, "I'm going to bury you here."
Yeah,
it's like that felt good, and it's like no, he escaped. It's like I'm not going to let him escape.
See, I found that a bit weird. Why? The fact that I can understand to an extent why he thought that about leaving them there, and that's him he's going to die in that the center of that barren planet. However, he knew the Enterprise was still there.
Mm-hmm.
No. He knew the Enterprise was crippled, though. He knew the Enterprise
was crippled, but he knew it was
but apparently
still
they
there.
were running away.
Yes,
they were trying to get back to Federation space.
But that's what I'm saying. So unless he knew he was going to destroy them and make sure, but the thing is, there's also a base there, a scientific base. So somebody would at one point come by to check out why they've not heard from it. Or
no, but there was because there's no way back. It's like but they beamed into the secret part of the planet, and like that's where the Genesis scientists had to hide away. And also, it's like, but the main thing is, I think Khan's thought about how am I going to get my revenge? I'm going to kill him, but then he thinks, wait a minute, if I kill him, I can only do it once. But if I abandon him, if I leave him to suffer for the rest of his life, then I can save it at any time I want.
Yes, and, I understand the parts they were saying why he was doing it, but considering his intelligence is basically, you're sitting there thinking he must know that it doesn't matter if we destroy the Enterprise here, at some point over the next month, 2 months, somebody's going to come out and find out why that space station, the scientific research station, isn't broadcasting anymore. And he knows they've got communication devices that they spoke to the Enterprise in.
No, PJ, Khan has got Genesis. He thinks he can basically take over the Federation, and basically they'll obey him from now on. He thinks he's going to take over. He thinks he's...
Yeah, but it's the intelligence part of it. I just couldn't get over that. That was a dumb thing to think.
What gets me though is an ex-signaller who used to deal with these things. Didn't get me quite so much when I first saw the film, but with experience, but I was in the signal at the time. That bit when Scotty cons Khan into thinking it's going to take days. Khan should have seen through that in a nanosecond.
Yeah, of course, because it was so obvious. Even I understood it when I was a kid.
We know it's a procedure. Okay, so you're being monitored. You give that information. Fine.
It's a tip
you
off.
Don't bloody tell them how you're altering the information.
Hours feel like days.
It's a tip off. No, it's a tip off to the audience, isn't it? It's a bit of a meta tip off to the audience. And also, I think Khan is thinking, well, my men are loyal to me. My men have never lied to me. And so I am assuming Spock is not lying to Kirk.
Yeah, but I mean, he literally says, going by the book, hours could seem like days.
Yeah, so it was so obvious that you're thinking, why did he not actually pick up on that?
I think we're left to assume again, Khan has been he's lost his perspective. He's damaged. He's not the same cool clear thinking character that he was in Space Seed. He's older. He's, he is damaged. He's allowed his hatred to completely destroy his perspective. That's why I think he misses very obvious things, because I was thinking that when we were watching it again the other day. Khan was as clever as he, if he was on the ball, he would have picked all that straight up right away, as you said. But I think he's damaged.
I think also it's also with the ego. It's like, he thinks, they don't even know him. He thinks they don't even know him listening. He's got that kind of God complex about.
He thinks that they think he's away. I understood that aspect of it, because they knew he was probably listening, but he thought that, haha, I've caught them, because they didn't know I was listening when listening in. It was just, but the thing is, the thing about these wee nitpicks, it makes no difference to the story because it's still entertaining.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Whereas you imagine some other movies we would be picking at it, and it would be picking at it because we disliked it, and these things you say how stupid it is. Whereas that one, you can have silly bits in it and still think, so, still fun, still good. Watch it more and more.
Well, that's it. I mean, nothing's ever going to be. Nothing's perfect, unfortunately, and they had to cut some corners. They had to take some liberties with plot to try to make the movie work. But I think we got such a fantastic product in the end that it doesn't bother me as much as it might another film.
Yeah, and do you not think that? See, when you sit down, the first time you sat down, I remember sitting down the first time to watch Wrath of Khan. And you were sitting.
Oh yeah.
You didn't notice that. Second time, third time, fourth time, still thinking it's a case of as you watched it maybe 10, 15 times, you notice a wee bit and go, oh, wonder why I didn't notice that before. And that seems a bit because you've watched it so many times, you almost know what's happening. And then you say, oh, that seemed a wee bit out. But it's a case of because you wouldn't have noticed it if you've only watched it once or twice. It's not important. Because you love it so much, you're saying like the bit when he's giving it the "from hell's hearth I spit it," and you're sitting there, you're saying that with him because you know that line.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the caliber of the acting, and it's the fact that they, like, for instance, a good example for this is the scene in after Terrell vaporizes himself. I mean, that's a horrific scene as well. Right. But like, wait a minute. As script, that's how. That's the wrong phaser. I know
that's the wrong phaser. I hated it when they went in their ears.
Got it. That's what Michael Burnham saw a recording of that, and that's why she didn't know which way around to hold a phaser. Yeah. That explains it. That explains Star Trek Discovery.
No, the thing is, as scripted in that scene, the bit where Chekov collapses and the sea eel vacates his brain. Yeah. Now, as scripted, that was meant to be that McCoy reaches him first and injects him, and that's why his body rejects it. But it's like they went with the take they did, and I think in a way, the fact they got that slightly wrong as played meant that it just was like it was just the capturing the spontaneity of it and the way the actors were just acting, plowing through the scene, and that kind of made it more real and more believable. It's like they could have gotten the scene perfectly as scripted, but it wouldn't have been felt as it wouldn't have had that human element. You know what I mean? Maybe, or it would have, but it would have. It gave it a little bit more of a human element.
Well, John's comment there actually is just reminding me of something else. I mean, it's freely admitted that that Maya was inspired by submarine movies and the rest of it. Submarine movies.
Oh, it was that bit in the Nebula.
But the thing is also there was another thing there which John's comment there reminds me of. I wonder if you picked up on or not. Is that they had the SOE in particular had a thing with their agents where if they've been captured, if they were trying to do anything under duress, they had things they were supposed to do wrong to notify the fact that they were under duress.
Yeah.
So I want that's kind of about. So I wonder if
it's like the
Orville was aware had heard of that.
Yeah, but the Orville did it. Remember the 3 pip or was it the 7 pip salute or something like that?
Mhm.
Well, no, I mean, the thing about the submarine thing is, like, it really does feel like you're in the wilderness of space, and like, look, the ship is the only thing that's protecting you from getting sucked out into space, and like, and so it's like, if Khan destroys a ship, you've got nowhere to go. If you're on that ship, you're done for. Or if you're in the center of regular one, and no one comes to rescue, you're done for. There is no way out. It's that claustrophobia. It's like, because I think the film plays the idea of no-win scenarios, and it's kind of saying, actually, there are such a thing as no-win scenarios. And if the further you get from earthly comforts into the wilderness of space, that's where the danger really hits, and it's like where you really can die out there.
Yeah, and that was one thing I did think about when he did say, "I'm going to leave you in this barren rock," right? And then Carol turns around and says, "Oh, this is just a chamber. We should see what we've done." And you're sitting there thinking, so much for a no-win scenario. It's no. It's basically, he's cheated it again, because it's suddenly he's in a no-win scenario because there's no food. Even if a month later a ship turns up, how much food did they have?
Yeah.
Then suddenly, no. Look, go into here and look. So even if they did get left, they would survive. And it's that type of thing. It's almost a case of, see that no-win scenario, still not a no-win scenario.
No, but they still experience deprivation. They'd still be marooned. They'd still be
marooned, but it's not like being marooned and starving to death or dying of thirst.
The interesting thing about that scene, I got to thinking, because as you said earlier, PJ, the more we watch it, the more, we pick up little things or something occurs to us. And when you were saying, he's won again, because there's endless, because Carol says, enough to last a lifetime if necessary. And yet, when we see what happens in the next film, where the planet of Genesis becomes incredibly unstable because the wave that is regenerating matter becomes, it goes into like overdrive, doesn't it? And it becomes unstable. So it made me wonder, was that an inherent problem that would have cropped up for them anyway? Would it have all eventually become unstable, or was that because of the way that Genesis was deployed, it ended up creating its own planet as opposed to transforming an existing planet?
Yeah. David said he put proto matter in it to speed things up. He wanted to achieve it faster. I mean, I think the idea was if he hadn't put that in, maybe they could have naturally got to a stage where they could stabilize it.
Yeah.
David wanted, he just wanted to. He was committed to the idea of making it happen.
Well, I think the Federation wanted results, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well, I know. Well, it was kind of an independent project. I think they were trying to prove to the Federation that we could have a better, galactic Federation where all is provided for. And I think
because food shortages and all that would be a thing of the past.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But it was thing. So, when did you first see this, and what did you the first time you watched it? What did you think?
Right, I watched it with my dad when I was about 4 or 5. Now my dad had like he had his TV connected to the stereo system, so it was on the speakers. We were watching it in his, and I was 4 or 5, and we were watching, like, vividly remember the scene with the eels, and thinking, that guy Khan, he looks a bit like David Bowie from Labyrinth. And I vividly remember the bit with where Kirk figures out how to shut down Khan's shields, and the bit where Tyrell vaporizes himself, and then the bit with Spock dying. Well, no, the bit with where Khan's dying, and he's going to turn the Genesis device. And because when I first saw that, I thought, is he activating that to heal himself? But no, he's going to blow himself up and kill everyone with them. And then, of course, and I do remember Dad watching, saying, no, it's Spock, he died. Now, the thing is, I hadn't picked up on who was who, so I thought Spock was Khan. I thought Khan was the villain.
Well, you can be forgiven at the age you were.
Yeah, it's like, Spock sounded like a villain's name. But no, it was Spock, and it was... Yeah. And I remember the funeral, and he did tell us at the end, I think Spock's going to come back in another film. They say he might do. I don't know if Star Trek 3 had come out yet by then, and that was my first experience of Star Trek. And I was watching with Dad, and he kind of explained a lot of what I couldn't understand, because I was always going, Dad, why is he doing that? Why is Kirk shooting the eel? It's like, what do you mean, why is he shooting the eel? It's an eel.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, Mark, and welcome. And welcome to Cam as well.
Right, your turn.
That is awesome. Yeah. What a cool memory.
Jealous. So jealous.
That's really brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. What a cool memory.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right, so, see, the first time I saw Wrath of Khan, I was actually, I was an adult. I think it came out when I was about 17. I think I was about 19 the first time I saw it.
Did you see it at the cinema?
Yes.
Ah, cool. Right, cool.
I saw it at the cinema, and I think
so jealous.
It was with my dad.
Yeah.
Me and my dad, because we'd gone to see Superman. That was one of the first movies, and there was a few movies after that. And this, we'd seen it because my dad, believe it or not a big sci-fi fan, but he still took us to see Star Wars, Superman, and Star Trek. He took us over they did a Star Trek show in Edinburgh, and my dad took me and my brother to it. And we were not kids. I was 19 or 20, but I didn't drive. My brother didn't drive, so my dad jumped in the car, drove over to Edinburgh, so we could go to the Star Trek experience in Edinburgh. The first time it is one in Scotland, and I remember doing that, and it was fun.
Actually, how did it compare to Star Wars and the previous Star Trek film for you?
I loved this a hell of a lot better. Yeah. I loved the Star Trek one, Star Wars ones. I really liked, but when I saw this one, I just loved it. It just basically just blew me away. I knew who Ricardo Montalban was because I'd watched the original show, but my mum used to watch Fantasy Island. I remember him from Star Trek, and I watched it, and I quite enjoyed it. And then other movies he'd been in, and I just thought, wow. And then when he was out, I just sat there. I was mesmerised. The very first time, it was at the edge of my seat. And I don't even know if I blinked the first time I saw it.
Blink.
I think they were like that too. Yeah.
It was just one of those things, and it's as an adult I was watching it, so I still felt as if I was a kid, because it was 38 years ago or something like that. It was a long time ago, let's put it that way. So I was nearly 20. It was about 37. I was about 19 when I saw it, and I'm 57 now. So it was a wee while ago, just 1 or 2 days ago. It feels like.
What about the? Did you know Spock was going to die or not?
I didn't. The same idea. I hadn't heard anything about it, but it wasn't something you would see in the newspapers. I didn't read the magazines at the time. Yeah. The nearest I got to it was if there was anything in a comic, it mentions the new movie coming out and stuff like that. Yeah. That was the only times I ever saw it. So I didn't have magazines and stuff like that. I was at the point where I just discovered girls, so
a little bit distracted, yeah.
Yeah, I was a bit distracted. So basically, yes. But it's the fact is, that's because the very first time I saw it, I was just mesmerised. I still love it, and even though sometimes I could be a wee bit critical of things like this, it doesn't take the love I've got for this movie away.
And that says it all. That says it all. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think we're in a culture of, where we feel a bit pressurized sometimes to over critique things. But I think this film doesn't have to be. It's just so loved, and it pays such wonderful respect to the characters and their relationships to each other. And it just got such a great vibe to it that you just don't care, and to be honest, you you don't, as we said earlier, you don't pick it up right away anyway, because your jaw is literally on the floor for most of the film. It's just that good.
And do you know one part of it I loved? It was because my granda had a habit of going.
Oh yeah.
So he did. My granda hated wearing glasses, but every so often you could see him go like that. And go,
I love that scene.
So I liked that part of it because it just because I said to my dad, "It's my granda." And he goes, It was just the way he did it. It just so reminded me of my granda because my granda always used to do that. Didn't like wearing glasses.
Oh, it's wonderful, that scene. And then he turns around and he goes, "Here it comes."
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think the film also has an idealism about it. It's the fact that Kirk he is facing situations that would crush any lesser man, but Kirk has faith that there's always a winning move. There's always a way you can win.
Yes. Yeah, and that leads back to the beginning of the movie with the
Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah, trying to cheat death.
Yeah,
that's what he was.
Yes, what I liked. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
No, that's what I was trying to explain.
My brain is like jumping to things. What I liked about the start of this film as well, with the Kobayashi Maru and the conversation with Saavik, and is she quotes regulations and then she gets told off by Spock. But then later on, he says, "You go right on quoting regulations," because they don't make it seem like, even though Kirk has been, he's become an admiral and he's not been on a ship for a period of time long enough to where he's lost he just wasn't quite right. When he first came back on, because he got caught short, with raising the shields and going to battle stations. He waited too long. And then he tells her, "You go right on quoting regulations." I loved that because it humanized Kirk again, where he was so angry with himself, but he acknowledged he had the humility to acknowledge.
He just didn't think about it.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And he thought, "Oh, I am rusty," but then he gets that back then. So I thought that was really good. That was well done.
Well, he was rusty because, like, the kind of, maybe by this point there was an idealism to the Federation that, this thing is a starship attacking each other. It doesn't happen. So he's like, he wasn't expecting it to happen here. He wasn't.
Yeah, well, he hadn't commanded. Yeah, he hadn't been on the bridge of a starship. He hadn't had a command for a period of time.
But the good thing is Saavik basically said to him, it wasn't a case of if an enemy ship. She just says if a ship comes into contact and hasn't made contact. But that's what I'm saying. So even the Federation had that as part and parcel of it, because they understood that it might actually be a friendly ship, but it's not necessarily a friendly crew.
But you must think the implication must be that hijacking of starships must be incredibly rare at this point. Like, it's not an easy thing to do, and only Khan could do it because obviously he has super strength. So it's, but I mean, obviously there's a precaution in case it is because they've got the shields in. But it's kind of, the implication is this is a rare event. This is kind of anomalous in extreme.
Yeah. I quite agree, but it's just a case of the fact is, but it was as Ben says, the fact that Sarek actually pointed it out. The regulations were there in place, and he ignored it, thinking he knew better, just to get told, "Nope, you don't necessarily know better. Doesn't matter what you think." But it actually makes it a bit more, humanizes him a bit more by being just so. Listen, I'm that good. I don't need to listen to you. Okay, remind me. I can't remember. It's that type of thing. It's just how many times have you worked with someone, talk to someone, and they say, I know everything. And you say something, they go, "Oh, how else did that do?" And it's a case of some people can admit that, yeah, I think I knew everything, but obviously I don't. And at that point, he had to admit he didn't do the right thing.
Yeah, but I mean, to another degree, if he had put the shields on, you could say that he would have to be racked with paranoia to think that he would get attacked by another ship. Like, so it was like he wasn't, it's like he wasn't. He'd forgotten he had enemies, hadn't he?
Yeah, and that was the whole thing. He was out of sorts because even McCoy notices it and calls him out on it and says, you know, you need to get back out there. You know, you're going to go crazy if you don't get a command again, because that's where you belong.
It's smart thing we was talking about when he shout, fire the photon torpedoes. Was it the phasers? I thought it was the photon torpedoes.
Right,
because they're routed through the engine, so they would be fired.
Phasers didn't work in the nebula.
Is it?
No,
the
No, he's talking about the motion picture.
When they're at war,
Yeah.
and they tried to fire. I thought it was the photon torpedoes, but yes, the phasers were routed through the engine. That's why they wouldn't work, and they was overruled by Decker. So that part, yes, is because he didn't understand the new way the ship had been wired. But with that other one, it was almost a case of, well, she just told me what the regulations are, but regulations don't apply to me.
Well, I think
they did, and that's what it was. It was almost a case of, listen, I've been out here long enough. I know these don't apply to me because everything's fine.
But no, I get the impression that Saavik had been quoting regulations so often that he was just jaded to it. It's like, oh God, no, you know, she's such a bookworm about these things. I think it was almost like Kirk's thinking, oh God, she's just an anorak about the regulations.
That's Vulcan to you.
Well, that's a common thing, isn't it? I mean, Kirk has put in an entire career, saved the lives of countless, people and aliens and
aliens.
But the point of that
scene, for something else.
Yeah, and the point of that scene was brilliant because what was happening was Saavik was like an anorak. She was like she was a little like Hermione in Harry Potter. She was like the bookworm. She was the one who was well up on everything, but she was also a Vulcan, and she was used to learning things properly and completely absorbing every bit of information. And it was great because it was just like saying, it was a perfect message because she could have been dismissed, and Spock was concerned that she was out of line.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Spock was also used to Jim picking up on these things already and not needing to be reminded. But what he'd forgotten, or what was happening, was that Jim was a little bit rusty, so it took him that first little misstep to get his legs back, and it was a brilliant scene. It really was.
Do you know one scene that I still remember the very first time I saw it? The first question was, why did they do that? And even when I watched it the very first time, is when Scotty comes up with, is it the engineer was Peter, the young guy?
Yeah.
Why did they bring him up to the bridge?
It was a little bit of dramatic.
But it was there for the dramatic. But the first thing I thought when I saw him in the thing, and he steps out, or he's standing there with the boy, and I'm sitting there thinking, why did they bring him up? Why didn't they take him straight? Because the next scene you see, Bowen sitting and he goes, he's dead. And you're sitting there thinking, no wonder, because he took him up there rather than bringing him straight here.
Maybe the lift was malfunctioning, but the point of the scene was that this is Kirk kind of being shown the damage lower down. It's like it was a kind of a dent to his complacency of, there's been damage below.
I would have agreed with that if it wasn't for the fact is the very next scene is he's walking through the med bay and you see them all there. It's just the fact is, why did Scotty do it? And that was one of the first things I thought when I saw Scotty coming out in the lift. What did they bring him up here for? Because if somebody's that injured, you don't go, right, we'll get you down to the medical soon. I just want to take you up to show the captain first.
Yeah, it was...
Even the first time I saw it, it was one of the things that was almost a case of, huh? It just didn't make a wee bit of sense to me, even the very first time.
It was a little bit of artistic.
I understood why they did it, because it was all about Kirk never facing death and never facing losing something, and it was to show that, the next thing you've got him in there, and see the fact that he died. I think it would have been better if he hadn't and he'd lived with those scars, then it wouldn't have been as bad with Scotty bringing him up, just to take him down.
It was the consequence. He suddenly saw the consequence. There was a bigger consequence than just a bit of losing face on the bridge. That was the real consequence, was the death of this young lad who stayed at his post, and all the other trainees ran and everything. It was beautifully done, even if it was a little bit illogical.
It's just that was one of the things I did think at the time. Even when the first time I saw it, I was thinking, why did they bring him up to the bridge? It was just because I'd seen the Star Trek stuff, and Bones, he was a big part of the show. So it's not as if you never saw the Doctors at any point. It's just, it seemed weird that
I think we're expected to assume that perhaps Scotty was so distraught, and he too was none of them were expecting that kind of attack on a training mission. And so they were all caught off guard a little bit, I think. And in my mind, I think to myself, Scotty was horrified and shocked and overwrought, and it was like he just didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
I
think the thing is, I mean, it looks like really serious radiation burns. We've never really seen that in Trek before. We've never seen, the effects of radiation on the body that graphically. So it's like you bring home the reality of the death in this universe very, very viscerally.
Yeah.
I've got some quotes, by the way, from Walter Koenig's autobiography. He read the script and he kind of sent back some commentary on what he thinks of the scene. And he said of Preston's scene, he said, "The death of Preston is tricky. That's never happened on Star Trek before. You're adding a sense of reality that goes beyond anything so far tried. It is possible you could estrange your audience by doing that. It is such a dissonant, brutal note in what is, after all, a family fantasy adventure. Pragmatically, it is also possible that it would reduce the effect of Spock's death later on. If following a child or animal act on stage is an anathema for a performer, then following a child death with an adult one may also be anticlimactic." He also says of Bones' last speech, "If you keep in Preston's death, and I feel you need a more moving speech from the Doctor, he is far too human to be so perfunctory, in which case he'd go on to, 'I'm still in the dark,' to keep them breaking down." Anyway, that's really
interesting.
Yeah. See, the thing is as well, I understood why they did it. It's just, it was just one of those wee silly, But even at the time, watching the movie the first time, it just seemed strange to me. And I understood why they did it, because it was obviously, that was very dramatic. The doors opened and he's standing there with this burnt boy. But see, if he had died and you didn't see him next minute down there with Bones trying to save him and then putting the thingy over him, it was because those two scenes were one right after the other as well, sort of made it more jarring. Whereas if the boy was dead, I could understand where he's just in shock and he brings him up. But it's the fact that the next scene you see Bones try to, and then putting the thingy over because he's died, and you're sitting there thinking, well, he was still alive when he was in the elevator.
Yeah, it was just done for a dramatic.
And I think if the boy had died and Scotty was there, then you could get away with it. Is the fact is, it's just pure shock. He brought him up to say, it just basically
no, it's not pure shock. It's to show that there's it's to show the contrast between Kirk, the usual triumphant victory for Kirk that you usually have in the show, and it's like, no, it's not been a triumphant victory.
Yes, I know that, but I'm saying the reason for it to happen. That's
which is the theme of this film.
Yeah, it's a reason for it to happen. So it makes it more understandable. If the boy had died and Scotty's in so much shock, he opens the door and he's still standing in the lift. You see what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Whereas the boy's still alive, and then the next scene you see Bones try to help him, and then he can't, and he covers him. It sort of takes that. It's a bit jarring because of that.
I think,
whereas if the boy it's died, and they just open the list, and Scotty's just standing there with the boy in his arms, a dead boy who he was in charge of and stayed at his post when everybody else ran, and he's just shocked he's still standing there. It's not a case of he's come up to the bridge, he's just standing there when they open the door. The reasoning why Scotty would be standing there would be easier to understand. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
not the reason in the movie. You know why they did it in the movie, but
what's interesting. Yeah, what's interesting too about that scene is the moments later when he's with McCoy and McCoy is working on him, and he's uncharacteristically cold. McCoy, he can be quite emotional, but he also has to be very clinical and very professional. But I have a feeling that when the boy speaks, it's simply because McCoy already realizes that he's a goner. He's not going to make it. McCoy's medical training would have, an experience would tell him that probably by looking at him, and he's given him enough treatment to bring him to consciousness for a moment, because he knows, Scotty is there hanging and hoping for some kind of, miracle. But so I think that the boy was probably, well, he was mostly, gone by the time Scotty brought him up in the lift. But I think, the scene was done for dramatic value. And it doesn't, it works, so I mean, even if it isn't logical behavior, it works so well, thank God, that it just doesn't, it doesn't take anything away from and there is sometimes just facing death.
There is sometimes in other movies I've seen it where something Disney work too well, but I can understand why they did it. Maybe they've tried to do it for a bit of character. What happened there?
I'm back.
Character.
I'm back.
Yes, you had two streams sitting down there. That's why I didn't probably you think this. So I didn't know what happened. But there is ones where, like that one, is a very dramatic scene. I understood why they did it, but it didn't make logic to myself. Whereas other ones I've seen where you understand why the logic behind the character doing it. But it basically, it's sort of flat because for the dramatic purposes, it doesn't work in the scene. But it still makes sense for the character to do something. You get that in a lot of movies. Sometimes something they try and do to make it very, like the Wrath of Khan, the new one, or whatever they called it.
Into Darkness.
Into Darkness. And it was a case of Khan, and you're sitting there thinking, why is he shouting Khan like that? Oh, that's just to give us the thing. Right. So it didn't have the same effect, but they only did it just to give it to us. So why the reason they did it was illogical.
Can I just say, I was behind Into Darkness up until then. I actually thought maybe there was an interesting story being told here and an interesting way of using Khan differently. Having because for much of that film, it's like Khan's an ally to Kirk, and it's like we've never seen that before. And it's only in the context of the Kelvin timeline they can do that. And I thought, that's interesting. When they did that scene where it was, and Khan, Spock had that moment, I thought, this is just descending into fan wank.
Yeah, and exactly.
I stopped believing what I was watching. And it was like, why have they done that? It was so authorial. It's authorsphere.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. That's where the complete opposite from that scene. Whereas for the character, he's meant to get so angry at Khan, he shouts, but it falls flat because the reason they did it was for fan service, and it made zero impact. But the difference, the character, they were saying the character's so angry for a Vulcan, he gets angry and shouts it. So it's logical why he did it, but the reason they put it in there falls flat.
Yeah.
So it was the complete opposite of that scene.
It was too on the nose. That was it. Sorry, Wendy.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just going to say, you can have fan service as we got in Wrath of Khan, but it's not disingenuous. It's not sort of it's not copping out by, pulling back an old character. It added value to that character. It broadened that character's story. I didn't mind the first Abrams Trek film, I have to say, because I like the fact that they gave him, it was an alternate timeline. So I thought, okay, I thought the actors were wonderful. They, I didn't agree with all the casting, but I did agree with some of the major casting, and I thought they did their best to pay homage to the original actors in the series. But I think by the second film, again, it was like
the Kobayashi Maru
in
the Kobayashi Maru in the second movie where he's sitting there with the apple. And you're sitting there thinking, and they don't think he's cheated because he's sitting there going, okay, and then it flickers and then suddenly everything works for him. And you're sitting there thinking, are they think the audience is so dumb that they couldn't work out he was cheated? He cheated it.
Well, the other thing is, old Kirk, or the Kirk we knew, he cheated that test because he wanted a chance to win it. He didn't want to cheat it just to cheat the outcome. He said, I want a challenge that I can beat, but it has to be a challenge.
Yeah, he did it because he wanted to save the ship.
He didn't believe in a no-win scenario. And he obviously tried it, and he tried different things. It didn't work because he tried it 3 times. But the fact is, they're showing that it's not a case of he's trying this and trying that, and suddenly there's a flicker, and then he's trying this and trying that, and it works.
It was an attempt at fan service, but it was a
case of I'm sitting here eating an apple. Look at me.
Well, the apple was interesting because it made me think about the scene from Khan where he says, "I don't like to lose," and he bites into the apple.
That's where I think the way they did it. The bit he's sort of flippant with the test and never bother, just continue, crunch, shooting an apple, the wee flicker, and then suddenly it's a case of do this, and I won. And you're sitting there thinking, really? Do you think the fans are that dumb that they think this is great telly? But I agree with the first movie. I thought the way they introduced it with the alternate timeline, because you can have all the characters, newer people playing them, because they would be slightly different. And
it had a marvelous feel to it. I didn't mind it at all, the first one. Again, I didn't agree with absolutely every single casting. I wasn't crazy about Scotty's character, and I wasn't crazy about Uhura's casting, taking nothing away from the actors themselves, but I just thought the casting wasn't right for those characters.
And the love thing between Spock and Uhura.
That was like, I think that was put in perhaps to sort of whatever he thought was going to work for the audience. I don't know, but I found plenty of things to enjoy watching that film, but I watched the other, we saw the other two, but I think I just don't care about the other two. The first one was okay.
I think the first one's the best. No, wait. I think the first one's the best, but I think none of them have the special quality that I think the original Trek film did. Like even
there's no question about that.
There is no, when you can look at it and think those 3 work or those 6 work as a crew. Yeah. They just seem to be a case of individuals just are sitting there.
Yeah.
Also, when the first one came out, I was very wary, even though this was 2003 or whatever. So 2009, before any of this, a lot of this crap, simply because it was Star Trek. But I thought the first one, okay, okay. They've changed it.
Put in the effort.
The way I looked at it,
what it left me wanting to know was, okay, so we know what that change has done to Kirk, but at the moment, the only impact on the timeline that has happened, even at the end of the film, at that point, is Kirk's father's killed. And he's born on the ship. I can't remember where he's supposed to be born anyway. But okay,
he's
so that happened.
In the shuttle leaving the ship that his father was.
I can't remember. I'm kind of taking it as read that he was born on a starship in the original timeline. But okay, that's fine. But okay, so the only incident that we've seen that's changed the timeline has affected Kirk and the crew of the Kelvin.
No. If you destroy a starship, that's about 400 crew. That's like 400
Yeah, that's what it
lives.
says, the crew of the Kelvin. That's what it says, the crew of the
The
Kelvin.
crew of the Kelvin, and obviously the ancillary cast, family members, etc. But what I would like to know is, okay, fine. So how does that lead to Uhura as a lieutenant, being a lieutenant at the same time as...
that didn't work for me at all. I didn't understand anything about that. Yeah,
reasonably young, teenage, early 20s Kirk at the academy. At the same time that Bones happens to be there, at the same time that Commander Spock happens to be there. I mean, how come they all suddenly ended up, all these characters, different ages, all suddenly end up in the same bloody, however long it is, 4 years or however long it is, at the academy? I'd like to have known, it made me want to know how that had happened. You know, it had that kind of effect on, I've got that kind of weird mind. I thought, okay, so that's done. So in that case, what's the path that leads all of these characters to be there? But they didn't explore any of them.
Yeah. Can I make a suggestion? I do think, to a degree, maybe it's often overlooked because Star Trek usually is seen as the more technical show, but maybe there's sometimes an element of destiny to these things in terms of how Kirk and Khan, and the fact that it's like even in Wrath of Khan, it's like there's an element of destiny in the fact that Chekov is on the ship on Reliant, and that's how Khan finds it.
You mean there were fixed points in time? I can take that as an agreement. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that makes sense. But again, how does fate work in that way? If you like, if you want to put it, but I know what you're saying.
See with that the first movie, or the first reboot movie, I thought the idea to allow them to change all the characters, it didn't bother me that they were going through the academy at the same time. It was a way of getting them all together, and they could have them slightly younger. So,
PJ, what they could have just done a remake, couldn't they?
Yes, I know, but no. The thing is, if they did a remake, there would have been a lot more of a backlash. This way allowed them to do the remake, but still say it doesn't touch that because it's a different timeline. And I think they did it quite well for that. So it allowed them to bring all these characters together because something happened that changed everything. So maybe because these crew died, that maybe this person who had known them joined the academy a year or two earlier, and you just didn't know, but it allowed them to bring them all together, put new characters in to play your old characters, and people wouldn't say, oh, they're just replacing the old characters. No, what they're doing is saying those old characters are still there because look, there's Leonard Nimoy. And basically, to me, it was a good way of introducing a new run of the show, but then the movies were crap. I think the first one it was a good idea to allow that to continue, but I just think they failed after you see the second and third movie. It was just pants.
I mean, the best thing about the 2009 movie is you can say, okay, fine, everything's in the Kelvin universe, we can ignore everything. I don't care. Something happened that went back in time from the Kelvin thing. It ripples back in time, which explains disgracery as well. I don't care. All of that, none of that's to do with the real Star Trek.
Wait. I'm going to read something to you now. Every time they go to make one of those Star Trek movies, noted David Lowery, who's hard at work creating a new vehicle to continue the Star Trek movie missions, the producers in the studio always run into the same problem in getting the original cast together. The reasons for that are money, power, creative differences, ego, health, unavailability, all of those things. Harv always had this ace up his sleeve, which was, if we can't get everyone together for one of these Star Trek movies, we should do a prequel. Like, called Starfleet Academy, the proposed film would have chronicled a young Kirk, Spock, and McCoy's days at the Academy as part of Trek's 25th anniversary celebration. Instead, they made Star Trek 6. So they've always had the idea of doing a Starfleet Academy movie that would be a prequel showing how Kirk, Spock, and McCoy first meet on the Enterprise, but like with young cast members. In fact, they did a novelization. In fact, Vonda and McIntyre did a novelization. It's Enterprise: The First Adventure. And it basically is based on the script for the Starfleet Academy movie that we never got.
I don't think I've ever read it though. I'm gonna have to read that. I don't think I've ever read it. I'm not sure. I've
Right,
got that.
it's by Vonda N. McIntyre. She did novelization for Ratha Khan. I warn you though, she doesn't like Scotty, and usually if you read those books, you end up not liking Scotty in them because she writes Scotty as an absolute.
Who is it? Because there's one I have read, which they did. I think it was a Reed Stevens did. It was called Federation. I think it's one I'm thinking of, which is a much better next gen. Originally, series next gen crossover movie than Generations was. I think it was written before Generations came out as well.
I've not read that one. I do know they had I've read the book. I've been reading the making of the Trek films, and apparently, before they went with the Generations idea, because they were thinking of how do we get Kirk involved in meeting Picard, and I think, oh hi Mr. Hyde, hello, not seen you in a while. I think one of the plans they had for a Generations movie was they had this idea of Picard talking to a hologram of Kirk and trying to get advice about this alien extra-dimensional entity that kept coming into their universe and causing havoc. And Picard can't understand this entity, and so he's talking to Kirk and trying to get involved with Kirk. And he says, "Well, how do we make Kirk more real?" And it's like, well, we got to make him confrontational with Picard. It's like, remember, Kirk got confrontational with God in Star Trek V, so he's got to get. Well, no, but it's like, it's like, how do we?
Why does a god need a starship?
Hey, Jim, you don't ask the Almighty for his ID.
Yeah, it was called Federation. It's just Judith Reeves Stevens. God, that is difficult to say. Yeah. Judith Reeves Stevens. The longer-awaited novel featuring both famous crews of the Starship Enterprise. Captain Kirk and the crew of the USS 1701 are faced with the most challenging mission yet. Rescuing Zeph and Cochrane from captors who want to use their skills to conquer the galaxy. Meanwhile, 99 years in the future on the 1701D, Picard must rescue an important mysterious person whose safety is vital to the survival of the Federation. As the two crews struggle to fulfill their missions, destiny draws them closer together until past and future merge, and the fate of each of the two legendary ships race in the hands of the other vessel. Interesting, I didn't know starships had hands, but...
Metaphorical.
Yes, I know. That's some good.
The good thing is, if they're saying that starships have hands, at least in the new starship, the hands are detachable.
Yeah,
that was 1994, by the way. That was published. Apparently, first published.
I hate to break it to you all, but the Enterprise is not really a she.
She's a beautiful lady.
To quote, who the hell was it? It's not Star Trek, but it's, no. There's someone else. I can't think what it's from, but the quote is. Oh, I know. I think it's from John Ringo. It's possible, but there's a quote from a ship. It's got an alias that all ships are female apart from Russian warships, and they're mostly gay. No, I think because if you know the basic storyline is that they dig up an old USS Des Moines. I think it's there's two ships they dig up and they stick artificial intelligence into them, and one of the artificial intelligence has gone mad, therefore escaped to control. But basically, they've actually got the idea is that. The ships, they're particularly talking warships, because of all the people that have lived with us, somehow that's imbued in the ship with a sort of a spirit. And the conversation outside the line is that because most navies refer to ships as female, most ships are female. I say the joke being apart from the Russian ones, and they're mostly gay. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be this.
But that one about the Russian ships, that was just basically after the Russian naval advert where you had all the guys floating around. They were all oiled up,
What's it might have been? I don't know. I mean, it was
basically. But it's the same old thing, isn't it? Join the army, feel a man. Join the navy, feel two.
Yeah.
But I mean, see, my understanding of the reason that ships were female is because they wanted the crews to take care of them. Whereas if they class the ship as a female, they're more likely, the crew is more likely to take care of the ship because they feel more protective towards it.
Interesting theory.
But then again, I could have just made that up.
And it's supposed to be like called like in terms of the mothership in a way. The ship's like their mother.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have mother ship for the ships go back to, so it's usually it does seem generally to be which one was it? Was it yellow one? Was it yellow one? What was it? Sorry, I'm trying to find. I've got the book. I'm just going to see if I can dig it up and get the quote, which I probably won't be able to. But
right, so myself and Sudoku have actually mentioned. What about the rest of these when you first saw it?
I'll let you go first, Colin.
Can't remember.
Oh, great.
That's him done.
Sorry. I literally can't remember when I first saw it. I mean, don't forget it's.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Colin. I was sat here trying to think, and to be honest, I most likely saw it in the theater because my best friends at the time were big sci-fi fans and big Trek fans, and I was really into Trek at the time. So I most likely saw it in the theater, but I actually cannot bring back any independent recollection off the top of my head. But that's probably where I first saw it, because we used to just go to the theater for anything like that.
Yeah. So what about Spock's death? Did that not really? I mean, that must have affected you if you watched the original series.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you mean Spock? Oh my God. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times I watch Wrath of Khan. Mm-hmm. I am literally destroyed at the end. We were both, watching it, again, for this stream, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times we see it. The pain is the same. It's just as sharp. It's just as difficult, to get through those scenes, and you just feel it. You feel it right in your bones, So yeah, and that is because these characters, particularly Spock, but all of the characters are so beloved, and they're so much a part of those of us who grew up with original Trek, and who discovered it shortly after it went into syndication,
Yeah.
And it's, it has literally guided my life in a manner of speaking because of its ethos, and it's it's just literally a part of my psyche.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, when I watch that film,
all the
I'm
death scenes you've seen in a lot of programs. I remember watching all the old war movies in the John Wayne, somebody dies or something like that, and it's almost a case of they just sort of in the home. Whereas his, it was, I mean, I have been and always will be your friend, and it's a case of just that's the speech talking about the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Kobayashi Maru. How I've never taken it. How did you like my solution? It's almost a case of that was throwing it in his face, but it was not. It wasn't throwing it in his face. It was just basically saying. Was he saying I didn't have the courage to try the Kobayashi Maru because I knew it's a no-win scenario, so I didn't see the point. And this is the first time he's had a no-win scenario and he's done it.
The bit that hit me in the heart is when Kirk's trying to get into the cub and it's like, "Don't open it, you'll flood us all." And it's like, and Scotty says, "Sir, he's dead already."
I know.
Yeah. But I thought that was one of the best death scenes. Because it's the most impactful one.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds terrible when you say the best death scene, but you know what I mean. It was the most impactful one because it was just so grim.
Yeah.
By the way, Leonard Nimoy wrote in his autobiography that apparently he felt that it might have been ruined easily because Nicholas May, like how much he loves gore in his movies. Apparently, he wanted when Spock puts his hand to the window and says "Live long and prosper," and he does the salute. Apparently, like in the original script, he was supposed to have lots of green blood on his hand, and Nimoy's like saying, "There's no need for this."
No,
it was radiation. It's not as if he'd been cut up.
Yeah, no, and the acting is what brought that scene to life, and the impact, the emotional impact, is what makes that scene so special. And to it didn't need anything else.
And it still has an effect when in the Search of Spock, when Sarek mind melds with Kirk and they're reliving it together, and it's just like he's going through it again, and that's all the lines, and it's sad, and he even says, "We were separated, but he couldn't touch me, he couldn't pass on my katra to me."
Little do we know, somebody else has got it.
But see, you think about it. You imagine movies nowadays. How many movies would leave things so that your next movie takes it up?
Well, they had.
Because you didn't think about the fact when they went, remember. You never thought about that, but
I did wonder about that. That was just that was a reason for that. They wouldn't have put that in if there wasn't a reason for it.
They'd already known what the movie was going to be.
No, they added that in post. Apparently, like originally they were going to do that, wasn't in it. And he was just supposed to die, and it was supposed to end with the funeral. But I think the executive said we want to give a hint that he might survive. So I didn't remember scene and the epilogue at the end where it's hinted that maybe Spock is going to regenerate on Genesis, like he did. So there's that panning shot of the casket on this reborn planet and Nimoy's voiceover, and it's almost hinting maybe he is alive. Maybe he's going to come back. But they could take or leave it. They could have done a sequel. They could have done Star Trek 3 and just they're just one man down.
When Nimoy did the voiceover, I don't know if it was the first time I heard the difference. Yeah. Because instead of going space, the final frontier, these are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Whereas Nimoy says space, the final frontiers, these are the ongoing voyages of the Starship Enterprise. I can't remember. I think that was the very first time I noticed the difference. Because I knew later on they used to say this the continuing voyages or whatever. But I think that was the first time I had ever noticed that. Wait a minute, that's different. They put different words in. I don't know if it was the first time they did that. It's just one of those things that I remember. It was the first time I noticed it, and it was because Nimoy said it instead of Shatner. But
well, I mean, it is kind of a hint at what Nicholas May is, because originally Nicholas May was going to call this film "The Undiscovered Country," and it was going to be about the fact that it was about death. So it's kind of almost hinting that Spock's on a voyage into where no man has gone before. Well, to death and back.
Yeah, interesting.
Puzzles the will.
Definitely, but it's just I thought it was very an impactful movie all round. A, it was extremely entertaining. B, it had basically Ricardo Montalban, one of the best actors out there at the time. He was just always one of my favourites. And another thing was, it had such impactful scenes. The bit where I spit at the and the bit where Spock, I have been and always will be. I mean, there was so many really good.
It was poetry. It was poetry.
And it just basically just dragged you in. There's another scene. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. It's literally it's almost a case of, right, you see that one you really liked? Well, here's another one for you. And you're sitting there thinking, wow. And it just one after the other. It was just so well done. And it was a movie and a half. This is a 12 out of 5. So this is actually gets extra points. Yeah. So it does. Definitely one of my favourites.
Off the charts. I'm going to have to love you and leave you, unfortunately. It's been a little bit of a crazy day. for us today. We've got some illness in the family and things like that, but we reached a stage this evening where there wasn't a whole lot more we could do. But I have to say, this chat and this film in particular, this chat has been lovely and therapeutic. We get through, and much of what Star Trek has taught me and taught us over the years is you soldier on and you deal with things. So we do have some again some illness in the immediate family. So nothing overtly life-threatening this evening, but just a little bit of a shock earlier today. So this has been a lovely respite and a lovely chat.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Miss for the world.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and our best.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. There's not much now happening tonight. We're just going to try and get some rest and just see where things are tomorrow.
Yeah. Take care.
All right. Yeah, well, take care all and enjoy the rest of your chat.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I went on. Oh, it's not going to be the same without wind.
I know.
Right.
That's it. Discussion over. Bye.
Far from over.
Yeah.
No, but I think what's great about the film is the fact that it is a great example of...
And Mark, see you later. Thank you for joining us as well.
It is a great example of the makers of Star Trek going through a learning curve. Because they did the first movie, and that was a
throw together. So it was.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't quite the right translation of Star Trek from TV to film, and this was the learning curve of we're beginning to learn how to do this, right? We're beginning to learn the literature of cinema, how to tell a Star Trek movie visually with cinematic visuals, and hit the peaks and valleys that a film has to hit. I mean, in some ways, it's got the echoes of the TV episode. I mean, am I alone in this? That I think that if this was a TV episode, the point where Chekov and Terrell land on the Ceti Alpha 5 and they find that they rush out because they know that this is Khan's lair, and they're surrounded by Khan's people in the sandstorm. Would I be right that would have been the end of a teaser of a Star Trek episode?
Why?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
You think about if that was this movie, if it was filmed now, it'd be filmed as a TV show or a streaming show, 6 episodes or whatever. That would have been the first episode just to get to that point where they go out and there's the figures. Wait, how long were you in the movie before you got to that point?
15 minutes, I think.
Yeah, but that would have been a half hour to 40 minutes to get to that point, and they would have stopped there.
Well, no, I was thinking they would be more the teaser.
No, but I'm thinking if they did it now, because the way they're doing things, very few things are actually go and make movies. They're splitting them all up and making them into TV shows or streaming shows, as it were. So suddenly you would get, instead of a movie an hour and a half, you would get a 6-episode series, which could be 3 hours. And it would literally, what they're doing is they're dragging things that would have been only an hour and a half. They're dragging it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they would have done with this one. They would have actually just mutilated it to the point where they would have had all the notes, but there have been so many troughs in between the highs. It would actually just feel as if it dragged.
If they made it these days, Khan would have been the hero anyway. And he'd have been female.
Don't start.
No. I don't think you can make Khan the hero. He's too sinister.
Have you seen the villains they make these days?
Oh, come on. You look what they've actually done with
Captain Marvel.
Look at Reva. They basically says they wanted Reva to be a role model.
No. Khan is still, for me, I don't think they've ever done a villain as sinister as Khan in Star Trek since. I don't think they have.
Yeah,
I don't think they have. I don't think they could, because I don't think they've got actors and writers who can actually write a character, and an actor like Ricardo Montalban who can actually just drag the audience in.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
No matter what people say about Sherlock.
No, I think
like
it. No, I don't think it's just that. No,
Mr.
it's also
Cumberbund. But
it's also it's also the fact that Star Trek has got such a utopian view that it's like Khan is an anomalous villain.
Not these days, I don't. From what I've seen of it. But yeah.
Yeah, but
Well,
you look at Space Seed, right? The very first part when you see Khan waking up.
Yeah.
I want to read all about your ship. I just read it. It's all on the computer. And you're sitting there thinking, somebody's just woke up, didn't want to tell you their name, but demands to see the technical specs of your ship. And you go, here you go. It shows that they're basically so trusting. No problem. There you go. Anybody can get access to this.
Well, I mean, they're making him feel like an invited guest, aren't they?
Uh-huh. But it's the fact is, even from the beginning, the very first conversations, you can understand maybe with Bones when he got the thing, because if you wake up and you suddenly don't know what's happening and you're in a strange place, but then Kirk meets him and he's basically, what's your name? Before I answer that, where are you going? Bug off, tell me your name. We're in charge here. But it was a case of, see, we're so trusted, no problem. We'll tell you where we're going exactly.
He's Bones is the doctor. He thinks, well, look, this guy's disorientated. He must have answers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You get away with it because of that. That's what I'm saying. So with that part, you can get away with it. But the second part, where he's speaking to Kirk, and the first thing Kirk says is, "What's your name?" Before I answer that, tell me where we're going. No, fucking tell me your name. You're on my ship. You do what you're told. But it's that type of thing that you would expect that nowadays. Whereas then it was a case of it's so utopian that they trust him, so they'll just tell him what he wants to know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, is it compromising for Kirk to kill Khan? We're on a mission of exploration. That's the Federation's mandate. We're not conquerors. We don't have an ulterior motive, because as far as Kirk's concerned, they don't.
Yeah, and who found it funny that the final war on Earth was in 1996?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And they had spaceships like that. It could actually I was sitting there thinking, obviously in the 60s they thought we would all actually be flying in our own space cars and stuff like that by the 2000s.
Well, so we were promised that. I still blame Raymond Baxter and
they promised it basically. We all had
they promised flying cars by the year 2000. It's 2020. Where are they?
Yeah.
Tomorrow's world is wrong. I can't forget
tomorrow's world.
I'm disappointed I didn't get my Mattel hoverboard.
Yeah, I didn't even get my silver suit. But it was funny watching all those things in hindsight. You're sitting there thinking, but there you go. You're watching Space Seed, and they're saying in 1996 it was the eugenic wars.
That I think is one of the things that unfortunately does date classic sci-fi.
Yeah,
and it's something that unfortunately. We realise, and we notice it, unfortunately, the people supposedly creating stuff these days do not seem to get the point that the closer to modern day you make something about modern day, even though it's set 100, 200 years in the future, you kill its shelf life. Yeah. We watch classic Star Trek because we say, okay, that's in another universe.
Yeah,
but it's in a Star Trek universe because.
But in Wrath of Khan, what we're seeing, although it's a fiction, it feels real because not only have you got the old cast, you got the characters have been built on, they've evolved. And,
yeah, definitely.
And it's like for instance, I want to read this quote from for instance, in the first movie, a lot of the cast complained, look, they didn't seem to understand our characters. And Spock, like Leonard Nimoy gives a classic example of this. He says, when the film ended, there was this scene where McCoy says, I'm happy to remain on the Enterprise. And now, this was completely improvised. Leonard Nimoy heard a voice in his head, which was the character Spock say, here's what Spock would say. Spock would say, I should remain on the Enterprise too. If McCoy is here, then my presence is essential. And it got a laugh. And then he said the directors cut it. And he said the directors cut it because they said, no, the film's too dark. There's been too many deaths. We don't feel this line is appropriate. And Nimoy's saying, but that line was so Star Trek. It was so Spock. And they should have left it in. And I think in the second film, it's like, okay, we understand these characters now. We've lived with these characters for so long. We know what these characters would do in this situation and that. And I think getting them together, that made it feel real. It made it all feel, it came alive. It felt such a vibrant film because of the characters. It felt, if you know what I mean. And it was experienced. Some of these characters have been through experiences since. Like it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm rambling a bit, I know, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. I mean, it's an odd. It's a really weird thing. I think we seem in fandom. We seem to be very schizophrenic. They're not. They were doing this one.
Well, we do. We all love to hate.
It's not that so much, but we'll do that, and we will say when you listen to.
You mean like listen to the fans, but don't listen to the fans, almost?
No, not so much that, but he's played it an hour. Most people watching will say, "Yeah, okay." If you want to know what Spock will do, ask Leonard Nimoy. He's played the guy for 50 years, whatever. Right? Yeah, the reverse of that is these days we completely dismiss what actors tend to come out with because they're just actors. You know what I'm saying? Is that we seem to think that, okay, some people, yeah, we know this is what their character will do, they don't know what the character will do, probably because they put the effort into it, whereas these days...
They've built their character.
Yeah, whereas these days, a lot of actors seem to just sit, I think, we seem to perceive them, perhaps, as just seeing characters as roles for paycheck.
But I think sometimes what we are doing is we see the characters and the characters are just the actor just saying the words again. So each of their characters are just themselves. It's like, to me, Jack Nicholson, there's only one or two movies I like him in because every movie he's in, to me, he's just being himself. He's not acting. And I think nowadays a lot of actors are just themselves. They're not acting. They're just being themselves.
I think another thing. I do think Hollywood has changed, and so the culture that actors are in has changed. Yeah. And even Nicholas Meyer has said this. Nicholas Meyer directed this film. He gave this great talk once where he said like that in the old days, old Hollywood was kind of inherited by a lot of immigrants, Italian immigrants, Russian immigrants who came to America. They didn't know the language, they weren't literate, but they watched cinema, and cinema taught them so much about American culture, and they came to love it, and they came to love cinema as well, and they made films that reflected that love of cinema. And he says these days it's not made by those people anymore, it's made by people in suits, and they don't love cinema, they just love the bottom, they love the bottom line. Yeah, they love their paymasters. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Which is unfortunate. See, you can understand. The problem is you can understand it if things didn't make money, they wouldn't make them. But the problem is the neurotic and stuff like that say is the people who are funding it don't watch it, and they're just getting the notification from other people. It's successful.
No, but the best way to make it successful is to do a film that speaks to the people. In order to do that, you got to be a filmmaker who understands what the audience want.
The problem is nowadays it's the people who are actually control of the purses don't care, and the ones that are telling them are the ones that have got the agenda.
Yeah,
and that's where the problems are. Whereas at one point the people who were making the movies were the ones that were funding the movies, and so they cared about what was going on screen because it was their money. You know what I mean? So when you had all the big studios, they were making their own movies and getting the money from it, whereas now it's individuals really. It's actually
it's to a degree you could say that's always been the case. It's always been the case that whoever is the party in charge will, have a lot of moneyed interest, and they'll have like their fingers in many pies, and some of those pies are media. So in the 80s, it was the Republicans, it was Reagan in power, and some of the films at the time reflected the fact that there was the Reaganite message, like Top Gun, Red Dawn. They were all telling this message of the noble fight against the communists. And in the 2000s, it became the Democrats were in power, and so the Democrats were kind of telling their liberal story about, and the heroes were liberal heroes, and of course when Trump got in power, it was still the Democrats were funding kind of the films, and so the films went overboard with this whole wokeness.
That I think is the problem. Is we said, it seems that these days, as everything seems to be about, as critical drinker would put it, the message. And I really wish I message. Echo, yes, exactly. You have to have the proper echo there.
I've normally got an echo, but I basically had to switch it off because it doesn't work properly.
Well, I mean, in some ways, this film is kind of post-hippie generation. Because on the one hand, you've got, Karen, Marcus, and David, who are kind of their idealists, and they're so against the establishment. They're even against the Federation, which is supposed to be...
they're against military actually taking something it could do good and turning it into a weapon.
But that's the thing. They have a jaded view even of the Federation, which is supposed to be the ideal... it's supposed to be the perfect society, but they're still thinking like the radicals of our day, who think you just can't trust the establishment.
And you can't trust anything, even though the Federation is technically military because they use military ranks and stuff like that, but they're an exploration. That's what I'm trying to say, and it doesn't work. But they still don't trust them because they're too militaristic.
Yeah.
But there's also even Khan's people seem almost like a reflection of post-hippiedom, but they're kind of a twisted version of it, where it's like they're all doe-eyed followers of this. They're both they're true believers of Khan, and you can see it in the way that he says like these people swore to live and die in my command 200 years before you were born, and we're going to go against the Federation, and they're going to follow him all the way because they think they're going to build a better society, and they some of them are kind of almost post-hippie-ish. It's like they're almost a bit zoned out in their following of Khan, even though he's going to lead them to hell.
Yeah, they're the Moonies.
Yeah, and even Joe Isham is like at the end, he's saying, "Khan turn back. We're not going to win this. We have Genesis. We don't need to pursue this vendetta." And Khan just loses it with him.
Yeah.
Wait, Colin, I think I interrupted you. You were going to say something. Sorry.
Right. I think I was because there seems to be too much.
Oh, the message.
No, it's about the message. That seems to be the thing these days. Is that although you look at the moment and you look at Lightyear comes out, and on its first 3-day weekend, it does half of what Disney originally apparently expected it to be. They expected to make 100 million. It was downgraded to 80 million, but apparently the original was 100 million, made 51 million. It's third at least in the box office, below Jurassic Park.
Yep, and Top Gun.
Top Gun is in its fifth week?
I think it's its fourth week.
Yeah, it's been going for about a month, hasn't it?
Uh-huh.
So there seems to be some possible change coming up, I think.
Well, I think the thing is...
See, the thing is, even with Top Gun, I never liked the original movie, and I don't like Tom Cruise. So I've not seen Top Gun, and I've no interest in seeing it, even though people tell me it's a really good movie. It's just I don't like the character. I don't like the actor, and I didn't like the original movie.
It was a good film for the time, I think. But now I think the thing about modern cinema versus Star Trek, it's like I think nowadays, like a film has to really stand out, and like I think a lot of what they think it needs to do to stand out, it needs to generate headlines, and it needs to, it needs to kind of tap into a tribal loyalty of all these people who believe all this SJW stuff. So I think that's why films are going well, because they think, well, that'll get all the people who are true believers of this ideology to see it, and that's what they're looking for. It's because there's so many films on the market. Whereas with Wrath of Khan, Star Trek, this was the only place you could go for Star Trek. So you assured an audience for this, people who loved the show, but it also, because of that, if you had a secure audience, you could take risks with the story. You could tell a really creative story, and at the same time, you could take a risk. But you also kind of like, well, the first film, everyone went to see it, but they're not necessarily going to see the next film unless word of mouth tells them this film's better than that one.
Yeah,
we've got to make a better film. We've got to find a way to make it better.
Which is the really stupid things they don't do. I think they may actually finally be realizing now that they don't have anything like as big an audience as they thought they did.
Well, they've burnt it, haven't they?
Yeah. And I mean, as I said, to the fact that, that even the quote normies unquote are actually coming to see, well, hold a minute.
Why do I have I'm unfortunately finding that's completely different.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Wheel of Time. One of my family members said it's absolutely fantastic. It was one of the best programs he'd seen since the Game of Thrones.
Well, there you go.
Sedation at the time.
Right, basically. So that's a normie. And last weekend, and I remember a family asked me if I'd seen The Mandalorian. No, was it The Mandalorian? Kenobi, because he says it is the best TV program he has ever seen. And this is not somebody. It's actually he's quite a smart, hardworking member of family, and he's just. It just goes to show it's a case of what is so good and thing. It's, to me, everything I've heard about it is just boring and drawn out, and the main characters. But no, it's all these new characters, aren't they fantastic? So it's obviously it's geared towards people who have been brought up under this regime, and it's basically that's all it panders to. It doesn't care about anybody else.
Not just that. For instance, if someone was fresh to Jodie's era, Doctor Who, Jodie's era, they'd probably say, visually, it looks fantastic. Visually, it looks, if they'd not been watching Doctor Who in a while, they'd think it was probably looked better than ever. So they'd probably be wowed by that.
My friend actually loves it, so she does. She thinks it's actually been great.
Well, okay.
Yep.
Well, I've got a neighbor downstairs who likes it. And, it's like it's a bit of escapism for him. And
yeah. See, the thing is, the way I look at it is fine. I'm okay with anybody who likes it and loves it. Just don't tell me I have to love it or I'm bad because I don't like it. I don't watch any new stuff. I don't even watch any of the Tennant or Eccleston or Smith stuff. I started watching it again in Peter Capaldi, but I just stopped watching it. I didn't even see the end of Capaldi stuff. Like today, yesterday, I got for Father's Day, my post came through, and I got Black Orchid and Nightmare in Eden. They added to my classic collection, so they're on for this weekend to watch.
Isn't it mad that Black Orchid and Nightmare of Eden were made the same year that? Well, Black Orchid was made the same year as Wrath of Khan. Nightmare of Eden was made the same year as the motion picture. Something even madder. Time Lash was made the same year as Edge of Darkness.
But it just goes to show, and yet all those are rewatchable. Whereas me, I watched the first few seasons up until probably near the end of Matt Smith. And I never rewatched anything. I think the only one I rewatched was School Reunion.
Yes.
That was the only one because it had Liz Slaton in it.
I love Matt Smith. I thought he was actually one of the better.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But none of them worked for me because I liked the stories and the classic ones, and I found the new ones just too flash and bang. So it's almost a case of every 10 minutes they had to do something to get somebody to look up from their phone. But the problem is, I don't have issues if somebody says, I like this and I like that. And I say, that's fine. That's what we all like, because I like certain things that you don't like. You like things that I don't like. But the thing is, it's when they suddenly turn around and say, if you don't like it, you're bad because... And then that's the times when the argument goes out the window.
No, but this goes back to limitations again. This is the fact that Wrath of Khan was made with limitations. Like, when they wrote the script, they had some mad ideas for it, which didn't make the final cut. Like, apparently, in one draft of the script, Kirk and Khan were meant to have a confrontation. Like, both of the film, like, Khan's trying to, Kirk and Khan are separated by two starships. They never have a on-screen
Yeah, they don't. They never actually appeared together.
In one of the script drafts, they did, but it was a case where when Kirk was headed for the Nebula, he was trying to seek refuge there, and Khan was trying to discourage him. And apparently, in this version, Khan was meant to have some telepathic abilities. He was actually supposed to have this reach out to Kirk with his mind and have this mind duel with him, where Kirk and Khan meet and fight in this dream realm where they're fighting on ships. They're basically whipping each other. They're basically, having sword fights. It's like that was meant to happen, but it didn't end up in the final script.
Do you know why I think they were thinking about doing that? Because see, Space Seed, I thought that's what they were going to do in Space Seed. See the bit when Khan's giving it and then he pulls the door sideways and hits the guy. I thought he was going to give it the stand at the side of the door and sort of mind manipulate him to get him to unlock the door.
Yeah.
That's what initially, the very first time I watched that, I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah, but the thing is, with Wrath of Khan, it was like they were trying to make less use of the physical strength of Khan and more the physical superiority of Khan, more the mental, the intellectual superiority of Khan. The fact that he was really well, even the bit where he shoots hit the Enterprise and hits exactly where he needs to. It's like that was 15 years ago that he met that he'd seen the Enterprise, but he remembered. It was his mind vividly remembered it all, and he's like it's just intellect. Like he just absorbed all the information he needed. He stored it because and that's kind of what a superior intellect can do. It's like it's basically it's just that's the thing about Khan is that he's a formidable intelligence in the film. Not so much less. Obviously you see bits where his physical strength is demonstrated. Hello?
Aye.
You see moments where his physical strength is demonstrated, but it's more his mental strength that's emphasized. But it's like in that sense, it shows that Kirk has to up his mental strength in order to beat him. It shows that he has to.
Well, there's the basically the part is his intelligence. Basically, he's intelligence but not experienced. His pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking.
Yeah. Well, Khan really thinks he's winning for much of this. Like even from the beginning, when he first sees the Enterprise, he thinks, "Oh, I have you now," and it's like just counts down to the moments where we'll raise our shields. Not yet. Yes, raise them now. Fire. He just knew when to hit and knew where to hit and when to hit. He anticipated the enemy so well, and it's like, and it was only towards the end that Kirk began to think around that and think, well, Khan is assured of he's winning. He's not gonna. He's gonna have. That's a blind spot for him, and I know how to catch him unawares because he thinks when he thinks he's winning, that's when he's going to lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hubris and overconfidence.
Indeed. Yeah.
But I'm actually starting to flag now. As I said earlier, I've been up since 3:00 this morning.
All right.
What is it, you two? You want to come up and say hello? Right, come on. The two dogs want to say hello.
I'm just going to say this now. Star Trek II Wrath of Khan lives in my head rent-free. Or is it the Seti Eel?
I think the Wrath of Khan definitely sits in my head because anytime I'm thinking of Star Trek, it is the Wrath of Khan, the movie. The motion picture for the visuals, I think, yes, but anytime I'm thinking about any of the bits and pieces they do in the movie, if I'm thinking about classic Star Trek, the movies, it's usually the Wrath of Khan. Anytime I think about the space battles, it's always a bit through the nebula because submarine warfare, it's always reminded me of it anytime.
And the thing is, there isn't even that much in the way of it's not major flooded with space battles, but the space battles you see is like they have more, they give it more punctuation for it. It's like when they happen, it matters. It's like it's like using it sparingly makes it work. So that so you got the great climax in the nebula. It's like if it had been space battles all the way through, then that nebula thing might have had less impact. But it's like you'd be saturated with it, but it knows how to not saturate it with it too much. So it's like when the action happens, it has an impact. It's like it wows you, and it does. And when it's the climax, it really is. There's another point I was going to make then. Just I think I know what you mean. It's like the motion picture was a false start in a way, and
it was a false start, but visually stunning is just that part. That's what I mean.
And so Wrath of Khan is a second true start. It's the second shot at it, shed of the ball, and it's a hit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I'm thinking visually, the motion picture, the bit when you see the Enterprise and it's the slow spaceship porn, no problem. So, but when you're thinking of the way they're acting, when they're thinking of a good Star Trek story, Wrath of Khan, because it's got all the bits it needs. It's got the space battle. It's got the spaceships, the visuals on it. It's got the characters. It's got the lines. Whereas if you're just thinking about plainly visuals, motion picture, that front part when you actually see the Enterprise initially, they spent that much time just going over the whole ship. It's just stunning.
I think the other thing about Wrath of Khan is that if it hadn't succeeded, Star Trek would probably have ended with Spock being dead. We probably wouldn't even got the Next Generation.
Now, here's a question.
We're getting now, but
here's a question: how would you feel about that? Would that be a good ending to Trek? Do you think? If Wrath was that as a final film,
if it finished there, I think it would have been a superb ending because it would have been so iconic. Yeah, it's one of those ones you'd be sitting there going, "Do you remember how it finished? You remember?"
Yeah, but then again, if I'm what it finished was not the last shot, Spock's coffin, untouched on the surface of the Genesis planet.
Yeah.
Because I always have to think to go back and check and think, okay, did they change any of that after Star Trek 3 came out? Of course they didn't. But you think did they put in the remember scene? Did they left that?
They just did that at the last minute. I think what's on the site earlier.
Yeah, I think so.
But can I just bring up something about this film? Is the way the model sequences were done through the entire thing, having those two ships get close together and almost crashing into each other was so iconic. And that last shot where the Reliant explodes, and it just gives that stunning visual effect as you see the Enterprise flying straight out into space at warp speed, and it just shows that cloud like forming.
Yeah.
Well, that's just it. You've hit the nail on the head there. That
you're never going to get that in the original show.
Yeah, because the Reliant is a Miranda class starship, and like we kind of become familiar with them later in the show. But when you're watching this film, it feels like Khan's Avatar. It's the way it's shot, the way it's framed. It looks like a sinister ship. And I think when they were writing the film, they were kind of, well, where's the climax going to be? And I think they just saw where's this going to go? We got these two spaceships fighting each other. Where's it going to end? And then one of them saw a picture of a nebula on a wall and said, "That's our climax. That's where we."
And I think they actually says, "Yes, that's our climax." But how do we do it? And they say, "Submarine battles."
Yeah.
Well, the thing that's always struck me about this is that space is an odd thing. We always talk about spaceships, right? But they're not ships.
They're vessels.
They're submarines. For the simple, actually no, they're not. They are 100% self-contained.
Yeah, like a submarine.
Exactly.
They're self-contained. Their air is recycled.
Exactly.
And but that's the thing I'm saying. Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan that's when that is emphasized more than any other Star Trek property.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we call them ships, but if I remember my terminology correctly, a submarine's not a ship; it's a boat.
It's a boat.
So technically, they should all be space boats.
Oh, by the way, to answer questions someone asked before about whose decision was about leaving where he's leaving Spock's fate ambiguous at the end. I believe Nicholas Meyer wanted to imply that he was dead for sure, and I think he probably would have fought to try and keep any ambiguity out of that. But I think the studio felt differently, or maybe
as far as I understood, Leonard Nimoy wanted to be gone. Didn't want an opportunity to say he was going to come back, but the studio got him, says, well, if you do the directing of the next one, will you come back?
Well, he was. Well, according to his autobiography, he had second thoughts. He felt he killed off Spock, and he felt guilty about it. He thought, why have I done this? Why have I done this to the character? It's like,
well, the weird thing is his original autobiography was called "I Am Not Spock."
Yeah,
I know.
And he then rethought that. That's why his second autobiography, I think, was
I Am Spock.
I Am Spock.
I Am Spock. I've got that one.
So have I.
I've got it audible. So I have.
You've got the Simpsons one.
No. While we're showing off, I've also got the novelization.
Hey.
Fortunately, as you can see, the cover has fallen off.
Oh no!
It's an old one.
Here's reading over again.
That's very similar to the state of one of my copies of Starship Troopers.
I have to say, the book itself captures the lurid feel of the film really well.
Yeah.
And, the darkness of the film. It's like it's brutal book.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm just going to also bring up, at the end, right? The forming of the Genesis planet, and then they have the funeral, and then the bagpipes get played as his coffin is shot into space.
Yeah.
And it heads for the planet, newly formed planet, and you see the sun coming up behind it.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
That is it is a great step up. That's all I can say.
Again, it's cinematic language. They've learned the language of how to do a Star Trek film on the cinema and how to use
and
story.
They did have help of ILM in most of the special effects.
I noticed that for some strange reason, even Starfleet seems to inflict bagpipes on people. They know nothing in 200 years in the future.
I'm going to defend that. I think it's like it's culturally important to Scotty, and Scotty was Spock's friend. And
actually, possibly.
This is Spock. This is Scotty's way of saying his goodbye to a friend. It's just like this is a friend's goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the thing is, it's made because I know it may well also be obviously the main influence on Starfleet is the US Navy. So I don't know how inculcated in US Navy culture bagpipes, etc. are. Because obviously they had a lot of Scots went over to America.
I do love the bit at the end where Kirk's in his room and he's still mourning Spock, and it's David comes in and he's saying, "You never have faced death, have you?" And it's like that's when it hits him. He's not adjusting to the loss of Spock at all. And it's like he's,
Yeah.
Well, very definitely.
But you can see that from it's all the way through. They're setting it all up that he has never, and when he does, the problem is with the next movie, they effectively says, "Well, you've no because he's back."
No.
Yeah.
The third film is like he gets him back, but at a price. He loses his son. It's not a free.
Yeah, the second, the third one when he loses his son, but you think about it, it's a more convoluted because they only introduced his son at the end of this movie, and then they kill him off in the next movie. So basically, there's no as much of an impact. Whereas if they had left Spock dead, it would have been for the fans as well. It would have been more touching because there's Shatner, Kirk lost his best friend, Spock, and the fans have lost Spock, whereas in the next movie they get him back, and the only one Kirk loses is his son. which the fans have only just been introduced in one movie before.
True.
Yeah,
so
it's a life for another life, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's just a case of it doesn't have that same.
But that's what McCoy says. It says what you do, Kirk, is you turn death into a fighting chance to live, and that's kind of, it's like you save some, you lose some.
Actually, I'd go further than that. I'd say he's not traded his son for Spock. He's traded his wife. He's traded the Enterprise.
Yeah,
and that's probably the most emotional thing in that for most people. It's not David's death; it's the Enterprise's death.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the most emotional bit in that, and that's probably more emotional, understandably so, in timeline-wise, for Kirk, because the Enterprise has been his wife isn't probably, you know what I mean. He's been an emotional attachment in a way for all that time, and then when he came back for 3 movies as well, and then he's the one that blows it up. It's not lost in battle. He's the one that blows it up. So I think that's probably the more powerful from him price to pay for Spock than David. Not sure quite what that says about Kirk as a human being. Probably that he's a human being, because he's not known David for that long.
Mm.
And then we see Pike.
But that's the thing. It's
just fantastic, no matter what other people tell you.
No, but I think even though like there's the it doesn't feel like a cop out, because I think they keep it so authentic. The character's so authentic. The fight for survival so authentic that it kind of, for me, it works. But they cop it out. But obviously we might discuss that another time, mightn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything we've not covered in this film?
I think we've covered it all.
Well, we have.
I was going to say, what's your score out of 10? But if anybody gives it less than a 10, get off the stream.
Well, out of 10.
9. I'm going to give it 9. No, reserve a 10 for Star Trek 4.
Don't say no to it.
Oh,
2, but I'm using binary.
Very good.
Well, it's weird because I'm actually doing. I mean, one reason I'm a little bit. Sorry, Jim. Sorry, I've actually just started doing a Google certificate course on IT support, and one of the things we're doing with technology is conversion into binary. What's the Jim got that set? There were 1, 0, 10. There were 10 types of people who understand binary, those who do and those who don't. Has Jim got that T-shirt?
Yep.
Yeah.
He has. So, yeah. But anyway, what we're going to do, guys, I think we should finish it there.
Yep, sounds good.
I'm knackered. I'm falling asleep here. So, ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, Trekkies and Trekkers, whatever you want to call yourselves, thank you very much for joining us all for the best Star Trek movie, in my opinion, and only my opinion.
Not just yours.
No, I'm saying when I'm saying it's the best, my opinion. The rest of you can have a different opinion. The same opinion, it makes no difference.
Second
Just
best.
People know that.
Voyage Home.
Voyage Home is good, but I think definitely for me, I think it's just because it's Ricardo Montalban. It's just basically, he nails it for me, and I did like him in Space Seed as well. So, but thank you very much for everyone for joining us. We don't know what we're going to do for next week. There is
I've got an
something
idea for a
about.
private chat.
Yes, I saw that, but we need to actually discuss it first.
Okay.
Because I don't want to put it out, and depends what's happening. But we'll put something up before the weekend. We'll get something out there. So thank you guys for joining us. And remember, ladies and gents, I'm not old, I'm classic. And all the other guys, they can be as old as they want or as classic.
Some of us are even more classic than you, dear boy.
Anyway, thank you very much.